In the Gospel today, Our Lady teaches us what faith is. Jesus told the servants to fill the 6 water jars used for purification, and each jar holds 100 liters. These jars were not clean, so the water was not suitable for drinking. Yet the servants obeyed Jesus. This is 600 liters of water, or imagine bringing 60 boxes of bottled water through the courtyard into a wedding party, from the well probably outside the house. And when the jars were full, Jesus told the servants, "Draw some out and take it to the chief steward." And John tells us simply, "So they took it." This is the most important question at this point in the Gospel. What did the servants bring to the chief steward? Was it water or was it wine? John tells us that the steward tasted the water that had become wine. So it seems like when the servants drew from the jars, it was still water, and it turned into wine just before the chief steward drank it. This says something about the faith of the stewards, of the servants. They believe Jesus, even if their eyes tell them that what they were bringing was water. They knew they would be punished by the chief steward if they brought him water and not wine. Yet the servants obeyed Jesus, and in their obedience, Jesus performed his first miracle. And this gives us a lesson on prayer, because prayer leads us to obedience to Jesus so that he can work great things through us and in us and for us. I said last week that if we are not immersed in the life of God, if we are immersed in a life of sin, our prayers are not heard. But if we are in a state of grace and immersed in the life of God, we are confident that God hears us and he answers our prayers. Jesus, in fact, gave a promise in Mark chapter 11, verse 24. "Therefore I say unto you, all things, whatsoever you ask, when you pray, believe that you shall receive, and they shall come unto you." When we live in God, he always answers our prayers and gives us what we ask. But it may not be what we expect or in a manner that we expect, because God is beyond our imagination. God is beyond our expectations, and our imaginations are always below what God can do. The second reading tells us that the gifts of God are given by the Spirit, just as the Spirit chooses. God decides and determines how he will answer our prayers. Our Blessed Mother knows this, which is why instead of telling Jesus what to do, she told the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." The servants took a risk, trusting Jesus, and Jesus did not disappoint them. The same happens to us in our lives. We are asked to take a risk for Jesus, but Jesus will never disappoint us, because those who trust in the Lord will never be put to shame. Catholics believe that faith has to be based on reason, but we cannot believe everything that our senses tells us, because we are to believe only in one person, who is Jesus Christ, and we are not to believe in anything else. The reason for believing is not because things make sense, but because of who is speaking and what he is saying. Reality is not in what I feel. The truth is not in what I think. Neither is it in what the media tells us. neither is it in what people say about us. But reality and truth is based on what God says. And we use our intellect and reason to help us believe in what God has promised and in what God says. In the first reading, the prophet Isaiah told his people that even as their nation was in ruin and they were in exile, he says, "You shall be a crown of beauty in the hand of the Lord. You shall no more be termed forsaken, and your land shall no more be termed desolate. But you shall be called my delight. In the midst of destruction and anguish, there is hope." Which is why the psalm commands us today, declare the marvelous works of the Lord among the peoples. Our senses will betray us. The people we trust, our leaders, our friends will all fail us. But our God is faithful and will never fail us. As the first reading tells us, "You shall be called my delight." He is our builder, who shall marry us and be our husband. As a bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so your God rejoice over you. God is not someone who is far away, distant, and impersonal. But God is here, and He delights in you. He delights in us and rejoices over us. Just as a father rejoices when he sees his child for the first time after the child is born, God rejoices over us. And this Mass is the right place and time for us, whatever our situation in life. When there seems to be no hope, then during the offertory at this Mass, tell God to build us up. When we are overwhelmed by our sins, our shame, and our guilt, thinking that we will not be forgiven, we tell God to call us by a new name and give us a new life, a life that is immersed in Him. When people tell us that we are worth nothing, that we are not worthy of salvation, we tell God to crown us with beauty and to restore us. When we are immersed in the life of God, God is all we need. And He gives us what is beyond our imagination and expectation. God will never fail us. We will never lack if we immerse ourselves in the life of God. Come to Jesus at this Mass. Do not be afraid. He wants to immerse us with His Spirit and fire, and to save us and to set us free. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised. He is revered above all gods. The Lord is King, now and forever.